The United Nations nuclear watchdog has reached an agreement with Iran to resolve the issue of servicing of monitoring equipment at the country's nuclear sites, raising hopes of fresh talks on a wider deal with the West. The International Atomic Energy Agency chief Rafael Grossi obtained the agreement in a last-minute trip to Tehran. It means international inspectors can install new memory cards into surveillance cameras at Iran's sensitive nuclear sites and to continue filming there, potentially averting a diplomatic showdown.
We are back from what I believe was a constructive trip, very short but very constructive trip, which I believe helps keeping the process in a good direction and will hopefully bring us closer to solve some of the important issues that we still have to solve. I would say that my first concern when traveling there was that we had a major communication breakdown with Iran, which of course is something we cannot afford, having so many important issues that we need to solve. And I think that was solved, but perhaps through your questions we can get some more interesting aspects on it. You may have seen in my reports that I said that the situation was, with regards to the verification and monitoring equipment in Iran, and because of their technical capacity and specifications, we were coming to a point where we need immediate rectification of the situation. And I think today's agreement gets us just that. This is going to be rectified, and we are going to be able, when we complete the servicing of the equipment that we need to do, we will be able to keep the information needed to maintain continuity of knowledge. As you know, this is predicated on a system which was agreed last February, whereby we keep monitoring, registering, taping, keeping information, and the reconstruction and the coming together of the jigsaw puzzle will come when there is an agreement at the JCPOA level. But at that time, we will have all this information, and there will not have been a gap. So I think with this agreement we have today, we are going to be able to do exactly that. Issues that are outstanding require to be solved. But as I also said, there is a new government in Iran, and I need to sit down with them and to discuss in a clear way what is their take on these issues. I could have some preliminary discussion, but of course the government has higher levels, and I got a very cordial invitation to return very soon to Iran to have this conversation on how to get to a solution. I had certain agreements with the previous administration. I need to recommit. I need them to recommit to them, or to endorse them, or to change them, but in a way that leads us to a solution, which is, of course, part of my desire. No one could expect me in 10 hours to go solve these issues and come back with that. It would be unrealistic. What we need to do is to set the platform which is needed to do this. This is diplomatic work. This may take time. It's not heroic, but is much better than any alternative.
For now, as a sign of goodwill, Iran will allow the IAEA surveillance cameras to continue recording, but there is no access to those recordings. The entire work by Iran is peaceful. The agency will continue its inspection and monitoring according to the Safeguards Agreement, but we have stopped anything beyond that, according to the law passed by Parliament. Our friends, please don't forget that we are a member of the Non-Proliferation Treaty and fully observe the safeguards and regulations.
I'm joined from London by a Middle East analyst, Dr. Saul Zadka. Dr. Saul, thanks so much for joining us. So we've got a reluctant agreement that's been reached on servicing Iran's monitoring devices at the country's nuclear sites. How will this decision impact other nations in the West hoping to strike similar agreements with Iran?
Well, if you want me to give you a Shakespearean answer, I would say that this is much ado about nothing. It's not based on measure for measure, and the likelihood that Iran and the other partners to the agreement will reach a final settlement is nothing but midsummer night dream. The reason why I'm saying all this is that even the sudden flight of Rafael Grossi, the head of the nuclear watchdog, to Tehran yesterday, was regarded as a kind of a concession that the Iranians were making, because the new leader of Iran, Ibrahim Raisi, the so-called the butcher of Tehran, did not even want him in Tehran at the first place. It is by order of the supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, that he was forced to meet him. And what was the concession that the Iranian made? They would allow the inspectors to come over and replace the memory cards of the monitoring cameras that are installed in the nuclear sites. But they would not have, however, and this hasn't been mentioned by him in that press conference that you just broadcast, they would not have access to the information, to the content of the camera until an agreement would be achieved in which sanctions against Iran would be lifted. The regional powers in the Middle East, especially the leading Sunni countries like Egypt and Saudi Arabia and Israel on the other side, they are not impressed at all. They think that Iran is just playing brinkmanship games in order to reinforce its nuclear program. And they point out to the fact that so far they have reached an enriched uranium point of 60%, which means the Iranians are in no hurry to go back to the negotiation table.
Wow. Dr. Zadka, thank you so much for that information. It's unfortunately, it's very realistic and quite pessimistic. So if I get you correctly, you're saying that the memory cards that have been put into those cameras, they will only be able to get the footage from those memory cards if Iran gets its way with sanctions being taken down. Now, what are the chances of that happening, Dr. Zadka?
Well, this is the compromise that has been achieved yesterday. Meaning, okay, we will let the inspectors to come, replace or update the memory cards, but we, the Iranians, would keep the memory cards. They call it under a double seal, double envelopes, which would be opened by both sides in due course. And this would happen only after the United States would reach an agreement alongside its partners to a settlement that would be complete and final. And why this sudden goodwill on the Iranian part? It seems to me that the approach of the Iranians, playing for time, has antagonized even the Russians, a close ally. And the Iranians were quite worried that the nuclear watchdog would be tempted to take the matter to the Security Council of the United Nations, in which a severe condemnations by the members of the Security Council, not only Russia, but also even China, would be announced. And this would put the Iranians in a difficult position. But as I said before, the process of continuing to enrich uranium is going on all the time.
And so, Dr. Zadka, thank you for that. About a minute, I think we have a minute or so to go. Who blinks first? How does this play out, you think?
Normally, the West blinks first. The Iranians are mastered in negotiation. Ask people who try to buy a carpet in Tehran Bazaar. They have patience. They have plenty of time. They never blink first. And they behave as if time is on their side. They know the economy is not in immediate collapse, so they can really play the waiting game as much as possible. And the fact that the new administration in Washington
Dr. Zadka, we got to go, but thank you so much for the information. Dr. Zadka, Middle East analyst there on the latest between Iran and the West.